Auraman the Beginning, written by B.E STARLIGHT. Chapter 1. Friday, May 13th, 1994. Glenda was waiting at Dr. Bearlight's Park Avenue office, pondering the likely outcome of the fertility treatment she had undergone in the last few months. It was somewhat dark and murky in the otherwise clean and neatly organized office. Soft, old-school music was playing in the background. Mercy, Mercy Me by Miller Jones, and she couldn't help but notice the large framed photo of the triple spiral fertility symbol hanging prominently by Dr. Bearlight's door. The doctor was known for his remarkable success rate in treating infertility, and Glenda's friend, Greg, has recommended his services. "He's eccentric, yet brilliant," Greg said. "His notoriety speaks for itself, but there is something odd about him." "What do you mean, odd?" she inquired. "Odd, as in strange, otherworldly." "Otherworldly?" "Well, many question his phenomenal success rate with virtually numerous helpless cases. There seems to be more than just scientific methodology applied in his treatments. Some of his clients swear they have seen his hands glow when handling his patients." "Greg, stop. You're being a comedian," she scolded him. "You're not suggesting I see a quack, are you? You know how long Osiris and I have been trying to get pregnant." "Glenda," Greg quipped, "of course not. I wouldn't recommend him if I wasn't certain he could help. Even Aurora has gotten pregnant." That was all Glenda needed to hear. Aurora, Greg's wife, was trying to conceive for years and has been seeing every doctor and fertility expert in town, but to no avail. It was this bit of news that persuaded Glenda to book an appointment with Dr. Bearlight and to go through a series of fertility treatments. Have they borne fruit? Possibly. Her self-testing pregnancy kit suggested she was pregnant. Thus, she was anxiously looking forward to seeing him. Was Dr. Bearlight successful? She did not observe any glowing hands or any other unusual properties associated with the doctor. Not that it mattered anyway. But it was Friday the 13th, a day Glenda considered lucky. Thus, she was hopeful and buoyant, visualizing herself holding an adorable infant in her hands in no time. Glenda recalled her first visit to his office. Dr. Bearlight was sitting behind his desk, his look stern and somewhat sad, yet he exuded warmth and calmness. Admittedly, Dr. Bearlight was one of the handsomest men Glenda has ever laid eyes on. Square jaws, piercing blue eyes, straight jet-black hair, and skin tone of a 16-year-old adolescent. For crying out loud, she said to herself when she first entered his office. He looks more like a model, not a doctor. "Are you sure he's in his 60s? He doesn't look a day older than 35, she asked Greg. "He's an alchemist," Greg replied jokingly. "He is rumored to have found the Philosopher's Stone and the secret to immortality." "Yeah, right, and I am Mary Poppins," Glenda replied sarcastically. "Keep an open mind, Glenda. This man is remarkably gifted," Greg continued. "He is a spiritualist as much as a phenomenal and brilliant scientist. I am confident he'll be able to help you and Osiris." "Glenda Rosamond Jones?" The assistant called her name, interrupting her thoughts. "Please come with me." "Hello, Glenda. How are you?" Dr. Bearlight greeted her as she walked into his office. "I am fine, thank you, Doctor," she responded. Please sit down. Would you like some water? Juice, perhaps?" It's been nearly a month since our last visit to Dr. Bearlight's clinic. She couldn't put her finger on it, but something was off. Was it the doctor? He appeared to be extraordinarily radiant and unusually energetic. Or was it the room itself? The doctor's room appeared as if it were immersed in a thin blue mist or light. It was as though she could touch the substanceless haze, which had a unique sweet odour to it. "Did you cast a spell, Doctor?" Glenda asked humorously. "Excuse me?" Dr. Bearlight muttered alarmingly. "A spell? What do you mean?" "It was a joke, Doctor. Relax." "Oh, that. Well, Glenda, some of my clients do think I am a shaman. I find it quite amusing. Well, let's get straight to it, dear," he said, his tone of voice changing abruptly. "Please, sit down. I am afraid the news is quite grim." "Grim?" she asked while standing. "Yes, regrettably. The treatment I have prescribed failed. You are not pregnant. The pregnancy test result you informed me about earlier was an error. You are not with child." Glenda was gasping for air as she heard Dr. Bearlight's words. They hit her eardrums with the ferocity of a thunderstorm, and reverberated like an echo in each cell of her body. She began breathing profusely and rapidly, trembling and shaking uncontrollably. Her head was pounding, and her eyes began to tear up as she comprehended the devastating news. She fumbled and attempted to talk, but just couldn't form a legible, clear sentence as she mumbled incoherently. But didn't you—" Glenda sank into the chair, which slid away underneath her. She hit her head slightly at the edge of the chair and lost her consciousness. "Glenda, Glenda, wake up, wake up," Dr. Bearlight whispered softly. The doctor seemed to be at a loss, but sprang into action immediately. He knelt over and stretched his hands forward over Glenda's face, and, as he was laying his hands inches above her, he gazed fiercely at the space between them, focusing intensely at the center. Bright white light appeared to be emanating from his hands and filling the air in between. The light grew in magnitude and radiance in the form of an expanding ball. A glowing, shining luminosity hovered and encompassed Glenda's face. The ball of light grew brighter and brighter, and seemed to have enveloped her body entirely. She finally opened her eyes and smiled at Dr. Bearlight, asking, "What happened?" "You passed out," he said, smiling back at her. Shaken and still disorientated, Glenda couldn't help but notice the light cloaking her body and mumbled softly, "What have you done, Doctor? Where is this light coming from?" "Calm down, Glenda. Relax. Everything will be all right. You needn't worry." The doctor helped her stand on her feet, and then she slowly paced towards the mirror hanging on the left wall. It was a heavy-set mirror that reminded her of the evil queen's mirror in Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Her body was still shimmering with a gleaming yellowish light, which appeared to be receding. The entire room, as a matter of fact, was flushed with a warm, intense light, reminiscent of an aura emanating from angels' halos. "Am I hallucinating?" she pondered. "What is all of this madness?" It must have been those idiotic comments that Greg made about the doctor that somehow affected her subconsciously, and she was now seeing things, or she may have been subjected to some unknown hypnotic effect that she couldn't yet explain. She could see the doctor in the far corner of the mirror. He appeared to be on fire, but unhurt by it. She looked back at him, but he seemed completely normal. She gazed back at the mirror, and there it was again, Dr. Bearlight engulfed in flames. "Can you explain this, Doctor?" she asked him, pointing at his image in the mirror. "What are you? Who are you?" Dr. Bearlight looked at Glenda and smiled. "Who or what do you think I am?" "Frankly, Doctor, I'm not sure." There are so many rumors about you and your glowing hands, your youthful looks, and your highly unusual fertility treatment success rate. People wonder if you're some sort of shaman. Some refer to you as Dr. Warlock, which, frankly, I think is absolute hogwash. Glenda paused for a moment, staring at Dr. Bearlight inquisitively, and continued. How do you explain what I have just seen, though? Your body was engulfed in flames when I looked in the mirror, yet when I glanced back at you, you appeared absolutely normal, and there remains the bright light wrapped around my body when I woke up. She stopped briefly to catch her breath and sighed softly. And, more importantly, she grumbled, I am still quite baffled by the failure of the fertility treatment I had undertaken under your guidance and supervision. She glanced towards the mirror, looking for his reflection. All who know you claim that failure is a virtual impossibility. So no, Doctor, I don't know what to make of you. Glenda wasn't about to beat around the bush. If there was any human quality she valued and appreciated most, it was brutal honesty and integrity. Tell it like it is, was her motto. Thus, she chose her words carefully, in a manner that reflected intelligence, common sense, and rational thinking, not insult or disrespect. She worked at the Research Center for Applied Science and Technology in the city, specializing in micro-nano engineering. Osiris, her husband, worked at the Rhinefield Parapsychology Center on the Upper West Side, focusing on cultivating scientific methods to substantiate paranormal claims. They both considered themselves agnostics and practiced what they termed controlled spirituality, consisting in attending Osiris's parapsychological lectures, meditating, stretching at the yoga center on 34th and Lex, celebrating the Judeo-Christian holidays, and participating as contributing members at the Center for Scientific Exploration of Life in Space. They met at one of Osiris's lectures in 1986 at NYU. Osiris was reviewing the current findings in Carillion photography, which Glenda thought was absolute nonsense. He's deluded, she said to herself. This is a total farce. Isn't this young black man aware that scientific experiments published in 1976 involving Carillion photography of living tissue, human fingertips, showed that most of the variations in corona discharge streamer length, density, curvature, and color can be accounted for by the moisture content on the surface of and within the living tissue? Hasn't he heard of Konstantin Korotkov, who developed a technique similar to Carillion photography called gas discharge visualization? She was about to teach this alleged scientist a thing or two about the scientific method. Glenda approached Osiris at the exit of the lecture hall as he was walking away towards the library. "Professor Jones?" she called. "Professor Jones!" "Yes?" he exclaimed as he turned towards her. "Hi, Professor Jones. How are you? My name is Glenda," she said, and stretched her right hand forward. They shook hands. It felt as if she were hit by an electric jolt as soon as their hands touched. A tingling sensation rumbled up and down her spine, rebounding throughout her entire body. Glenda gazed at Osiris's emerald eyes, and all thoughts of discourse have simply melted away. "I have never seen a black man with emerald eyes," she quipped. "Excuse my staring." Osiris smiled at her, exposing the whitest set of teeth she has ever seen. "Well, I am a product of mixed marriage. My mother is from Sweden, and my father's from Kenya." "Wow," she said. "Fascinating." "I must say, you remind me of someone," Osiris said. "Who?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Barbie." "Yes," Glenda laughed. "I get that a lot," she said, tossing her long blonde hair and striking a Barbie pose. "That is indeed a weird coincidence," she continued. "My parents are from Denmark. They have moved to the States in the early 50s. "How unexpected," he uttered. "Would you like to get a cup of coffee, Glenda? I'm heading toward the library to grab a paper. Just wait here for a second. I'll be right back." Glenda's heart was racing. She felt attracted to this young black man like a moth to a flame. But it was his demeanour and sense of calm and peace that captivated her even more so than his looks. Their shared Scandinavian origins was intriguing. Yet she pondered about his name. Osiris. Why Osiris? Wasn't Osiris the Egyptian god of the afterlife, underworld and the dead? He should have been named Thor, shouldn't he? Osiris walked out of the library and onto the hallway and waved at her. She proceeded towards him, contemplating whether to initiate a discussion about Carillion photography, as she originally intended, or maybe focus on light personal conversation. She decided the latter. So why parapsychology, Professor Jones? Call me Osiris. He smiled, grabbing her hand as they walked down the stairs towards the cafeteria. They sat and talked for hours about their shared passion for science since early childhood. They were both of similar age, 27, grew up in a semi-observant Lutheran Christian families, and went on exploring spirituality, yoga, and meditation. Both appeared to have spent considerable time in India. Osiris conducted scientific experimentation in the outskirts of New Delhi, testing yogas who allegedly exhibit supernatural powers, and Glenda stayed in an ashram for 2 months and travelled throughout India. The conversation continued uninterrupted as they further explored their mutual passion for R&B and jazz, the arts, sci-fi movies, and off-Broadway theatre. Glenda's heart was beating ever faster. It's been some time since she's engaged in such a deep, personal conversation with a man. She wasn't much for relationships, and focused her attention on her career, yet left the door slightly open for the possibility of finding love. Is this it? She mentally asked herself. Come on, don't be stupid. You just met the man. Snap out of it. You're behaving like a smitten 16-year-old girl. Sure enough, a year later, Osiris and Glenda tied the knot to the tune of Just the Way You Are by Barry White. Glenda looked at Dr. Bearlight intensively, awaiting his response as her mind momentarily wandered around the past events that led her to him. It's funny, he said as he asked her to sit down, that the term warlock or shaman comes to mind when you encounter phenomena out of the ordinary. There is, however, a possible explanation to what you have witnessed, though I am not quite sure I can explain the mechanism of how it works. Not yet, anyway, he sighed. If you recall, your husband spent a few years in India conducting scientific research related to yogas with alleged supernatural powers. I was one of those yogas. I was in my early 40s, consumed by an unrelenting passion to explore and expand my understanding of human spirituality, connect with my innermost essence, and discover unexplored human potentialities. My search for enlightenment has brought me closer to grasping the nature of our human uniqueness and our ability to literally transform reality with the power of our consciousness alone, thereby becoming godlike. Stop! She exclaimed. You and Osiris met before my treatment? He never mentioned it. That's because I asked him not to. I thought you might forgo the fertility treatment because of misconceived impressions about me. I felt that the circumstances in which your husband and I met will totally dissuade you from considering my services. What circumstances? She asked alarmingly. I saved your husband's life. You did? She looked at him in disbelief. How? Osiris was observing one of the fakers attempting to charm a cobra with a pungi. The snake was startled suddenly and was rapidly crawling towards your husband as the cobra was standing at the edge of its tail, ready to attack. Instinctively, I stretched my hand towards the cobra as if I was about to grab it. Instead, a flash of bright light zoomed right out of my hands and engulfed my entire body. Just as you observed in the mirror, the light detached itself completely from me and proceeded towards the reptile, creating a barrier between it and Osiris, and right in front of our eyes, and as we gazed in disbelief and astonishment, the light instantaneously solidified and turned into a Madagascan mongoose, shimmering and glowing with the intensity of a miniaturized sun. The mongoose sank its sharp teeth into the back of the head of the cobra, which melted away immediately. The mongoose was fading away too, as the intensity of its radiating light diminished in scope and magnitude. It took a few more seconds, and the reptile remains, and the mongoose vanished into thin air. The doctor paused briefly and then continued. It was your husband, myself, and the snake charmer who witnessed the event. The fakir stood up, all shaking and trembling in fear, bowing to me, and requesting permission to depart. They were both as startled as I was, since this instinctive demonstration of wonderment was indeed mind-blowing, to say the least. Your husband was researching my aura's ability to detach itself from my body, but never in our wildest dreams did we conceive that this luminescent energy manifestation surrounding our bodies might have a life of its own, solidifying itself in the physical plane in accordance with our thoughts. Glenda felt a sudden urge to walk away and leave. This was far too much for her scientific mind to grasp. If the doctor was not a lunatic, then the term lunacy must be redefined, and fast. She was angry at Osiris and Greg for urging her to consider this crook's services. What came over these two? She was getting angrier by the minute, feeling as though she was misled and deceived by her husband and her best friend. For what purpose, damn it? Yet there remained the doctor's reputation as a top-notch fertility expert. She did her due diligence. Dr. Bearlight was indeed an expert in his field, but his treatment didn't work. Not on her anyway. Why? Doctor, you must excuse me. I don't want to be rude, but this is all far too difficult for me to comprehend. It sounds so far-fetched, as though the whole episode was taken from a sci-fi movie. What exactly are you saying? She persisted. Are you Master Yoda from a galaxy far, far away, manipulating the Force? She giggled. No, Glenda, not the Force. And there is certainly no need to travel to a galaxy far, far away to perform these feats of wonder. I'll prove it to you, he said, and before she was able to utter another word, Dr. Bearlight assumed the star position. His neck tilted slightly backward with his palms positioned upward. A powerful flash of bright light sprang right out of his head and leaped across from his body, encircling Glenda, who appeared to be panicking. Behold, he said in a commanding voice. The light became denser, becoming ethereal at first, and then in a matter of seconds, it solidified and morphed into a gigantic butterfly. The insect battered its wings to reveal the most dazzling plethora of colors enmeshed in dust-like luminescence. The butterfly flew over Glenda and landed onto the doctor's desk, where it desolidified and transformed once again into a living fairy, an actual tiny winged humanoid-type creature, with shimmering gold hair and pointed elfin ears. The imp battered her translucent wings and flew right towards Glenda, and landed on her left shoulder, appearing to whisper in her ear. Glenda was semi-floating in mid-air as the tiny being dissolved into pure bright light and morphed yet again into an athletic and youthful-looking man dressed in a white tunic, holding a bow and a golden lyre. She seemed to have recognized him as he approached closer to her, smiling, while she was still hovering several inches above ground. It's Apollo, the Greek god of light, she said to herself as she landed softly onto the ground, and as the god stretched his hands forward to greet her, Apollo abruptly dissolved, however, into a shapeless sparkling light that kept morphing into a cacophony of living creatures and inanimate objects that dazzled Glenda's faculties, while imbuing her with a sense of calm and peace, rather than panic and shock that immobilized her when the doctor cast his aura into the room. The episode lasted about 5 minutes, in which Glenda felt as if she were transported to another realm of reality, experiencing otherworldly phenomena. Dr. Bearlight looked at Glenda throughout the entire event. His serene gaze assured her she was safe and that no harm would come to her. The doctor's aura had a life of its own. Though separate entirely from his body, it appeared to be connected to him consciously, transfiguring and materializing itself in conformity with the images generated in his mind. The light finally assumed its original ethereal state and surrounded the doctor as it gradually reabsorbed itself into his body. Glenda approached Dr. Bearlight, semi-breathless, shaken, and befuddled beyond reproach. Her scientific mind was crashed asunder. This was, after all, her first ever alleged supernatural experience, and she wasn't yet sure about what she has just witnessed. Attempting not to sound unnerved or rattled by the doctor's demonstration, she composed herself and looked at Dr. Bearlight somewhat bewildered, carefully considering what to say next. "I am not quite certain what it is I have just witnessed, Doctor. Whatever you have just demonstrated might have a rational explanation. You appear to be shaping and moulding reality somehow, albeit shortly, utilizing your aura in a manner I have yet to understand. Most other people will call that magic. But you know what I think about magic. It is all superstition and outright balderdash. There is no such thing as magic." "You are quite right," the doctor acknowledged. "There is no such thing as magic. Only unexplained phenomena that are bound to be analyzed and demystified sooner or later. Call it matter manipulation," he continued. "But instead of wands or spells to direct our conscious thoughts, we use our energy field, our aura, by magnifying it immensely and detaching it from our bodies to solidify and alter reality." "Still, Doctor, you must admit that what I have just witnessed can easily be misconstructed as magic, and the only way to verify the nature of the ability you just demonstrated is to subject yourself to scientific scrutiny and rigorous investigative experimentation. And besides, Doctor, what does all this have to do with the failed fertility treatment?" She stared at him, looking sad and somber. "We'll get to that in a second, Glenda. Indeed, your husband and I have been working together for years, attempting to understand my abilities. We have kept our joint research pretty much to ourselves to prevent a media circus and safeguard a semblance of normalcy in my life. You are now an active participant in this secretive research as well, and discreetness is of utmost importance. Now, let's try to make some sense of the so-called magic you have just witnessed. Do you recall the story of the golem?" "Yes, of course," she replied. "Osiris has given a few lectures about Jewish mysticism in NYU. "That's right. According to Jewish mystical lore, a golem is an artificial creature created by magic, often to serve its creator. It is made from soil and brought to life by reciting a combination of letters from the Hebrew alphabet, evoking the name of God, and using the Book of Creation. The most well-known story of the golem is connected to Rabbi Judah Leo, also known as the Maharal of Prague. It was said that he created a golem out of clay to protect the Jewish community from the blood libel and to help in doing physical labor, since golems are very strong. The creature ultimately appeared to have threatened innocent lives, so Rabbi Liao removed the divine name, rendering the golem lifeless. Other stories in Jewish Talmud tell of two anonymous sages who were able to create a 1/3 sized calf for Shabbat meal out of nothing. Leave it to the ancient Egyptians, however, to set the foundation to all things magical, including converting non-living things and images to become living and making them act per the magician's wishes. The doctor paused for a second, catching his breath, and then continued. What you have just observed is no different from the feats performed by Egyptian sorcerers and Jewish rabbis. Yet your husband and I are quite convinced that the ability to transfigure our aura and mold it into solid matter can be subjected to stringent scientific investigation. Thus far, we have concluded that consciousness, in combination with electrical impulses in our bodies, can influence existing matter and reshape reality. My own aura appears to have been transformed into a symbiotic energy field composed of matter and non-matter, pulsating jointly, phasing in and out of existence, while totally subjected to my thoughts. I'm able to immensely intensify the electric impulses in my body to such a degree that my aura can solidify outwardly into a formed substance for a limited time. The process, however, can be perfected by increasing the energy level and thereby intensifying the solidification process, thus injecting life into my thought form and giving it permanency. Glenda couldn't help but utter, "Wow, this is indeed an unusual reconceptualization of the term magic." She continued, "The question is, can the process be repeated and verified by other scientists?" Currently, I'm the only man alive who is able to manifest such phenomena. Soon, there are going to be 2 others. Who? You and your husband. We are going to create a living child, a child of light, born from your combined auras. Glenda was getting a severe migraine. The last 2 hours at the doctor's office have been mind-boggling, to say the least. She pinched herself lightly to ensure she was awake and in control of her faculties. She was. I have mentioned the possibility to Osiris briefly, but we haven't discussed it thoroughly. Dr. Bearlight continued, My fertility treatments never fail. You are the first unsuccessful case ever. Maybe it's an omen, a sign that we should consider a different approach. Rest assured, Glenda, we are going to bring forth life. He smiled. Dazed and somewhat incoherent because of this life-altering reality onslaught she has just endured, Glenda couldn't help but smile back at the doctor, asking in a somewhat sarcastic tone, "And how do you suggest we do that?" "By training you, of course," he responded. "You'll become adept at manipulating your auras in no time. You did not expect any of it," he continued as he was walking her towards the door. "The entire episode must look as though it was taken right out from the Twilight Zone, but I assure you, it was not." He nodded. "I am confident that once you discuss it with Osiris, you will find his input in the matter inspiring." He then pulled the office door wide open and yelled as she was exiting, "See you in 2 days." He slammed the door behind her. Chapter 2. Glenda was walking down Park Avenue, feeling tired and exhausted, her mind still racing and attempting to digest the events she just experienced. "Taxi! Taxi!" She impatiently hailed for a cab as she watched a slew of them passing her by. "Where to?" the cab driver who finally stopped asked her. "West 80th Street. "You've got to be kidding me," she said to herself as she sat down. One of her favorite songs was playing, Calling Occupants of Interplanetary Craft by the Carpenters. "How quaint," she mumbled incoherently as she listened to the words. "In your mind, you have capacities, you know, to telepath messages through the vast unknown. You've been observing our Earth, and we'd like to make a contact with you. We are your friends, calling occupants of interplanetary craft." Glenda played and replayed the fantastic events that have unfolded in Dr. Bearlight's office. It was much easier to entertain the possibility that he may have been an alien from that interplanetary craft the carpenters sang about, rather than a mere human being with such unbelievable powers. How else could it be explained away? Was Dr. Bearlight a charlatan? Did he somehow manage to drug her? No, it cannot be. She discounted that possibility outright. She wasn't drugged, and he, mind you, was about to administer an encore of his abilities in 2 days. But what a preposterous idea, she pondered, creating a child from our combined solidified auras. What utter nonsense. She was getting sleepy by the minute and dozed off, breathing heavily. "Miss, miss," the cab driver called, gently waking her up. "We're here." "Oh, sorry, sir. I'm worn out. Had a long day." She smiled at the driver. "Thank you. Be safe," she said as she stepped out of the car and walked inside her building lobby, patiently waiting by the elevator. "Come on, come on," some delivery boy who stood next to her uttered angrily. The elevator door finally opened, and they both walked in. "Everything all right, ma'am?" he asked. "Yes, thanks for asking. Just tired, that's all." She got off at the 13th floor and stormed into their apartment. "Ozzy, are you home?" she shouted. "Yes, honey, I'm right here, in the kitchen." "You knew about it, didn't you?" she snapped at him. "How could you trap me like that?" "Trap you?" he asked, smiling. "I don't find it amusing at all." She raised her voice slightly. "You could have warned me." "Warn you about what exactly? Flying fairies and unicorns?" They both burst out laughing. "No, seriously," Glenda continued after catching her breath. "You could have at least hinted at the possibility that something peculiar was about to happen." "Glennie, dear, we both know how you get when we discuss paranormal research. You wanted documented proof. Cold, hard, physical evidence. Well, darling, you got your fill of it today. I couldn't very well give you any hints. But the hints were there already. Glowing hands, alchemist. You've heard all the gossip and innuendos about Dr. Bearlight, which nobody takes seriously, and all discount as one big joke. Look, I can't out the guy. The last thing we need is the media all over him. Well, not until we complete our research, anyway. But what about saving your life? Don't you think you should have told me at least that?" she quizzed. "Maybe, but the circumstances of that event were so stunning and mind-blowing. I knew you would not believe a word of it. You had to see it for yourself firsthand," he said, pulling her towards him and embracing her warmly. I know, you've had quite a jolt." He looked at her intensely. "I love you," he whispered as their lips locked. "Do you think it will work?" she asked, overcome with emotion and her eyes tearing up. "The whole idea sounds so preposterous. Am I mad at myself for even considering this? Whatever it is, we must be so desperate for a child we are willing to hang on to imaginary straws. You know, Glennie, as mind-numbing as it seems, I think it will work. I believe it will," he said as they remained embraced. "We have witnessed incontrovertible proof that light solidification exists, and though we are not yet able to understand how it actually works, we cannot deny what we have experienced. We are being offered an opportunity to embark on a new path of creating life in an unimaginable way. Dr. Bearlight had to stun and overwhelm our senses to create a new mindset, which would quell our doubts and allow for subconscious acceptance of such possibility. We could have chosen adoption, but you must admit that the prospect of conceiving our own child in such an incomprehensible manner and participating in such a miraculous event is quite an appealing thought for researchers such as ourselves, who have been trying to unravel the secrets of the universe our entire lives." "You're right," she said softly, hugging him. "You're right." Osiris swept her off her feet and carried her to the bedroom. "My sweet Glenda," he muttered softly as he laid her gently on the bed. "We're having a baby." Chapter 3. Sunday, May 15th, 1994. Dr. Bearlight exited the elevator and paced towards Osiris and Glenda's apartment. He knocked softly on the door and waited for a moment or two. "Hi, Doctor. How are you?" Glenda asked as she opened the door and let him in. "I'm fine, Glenda. Thank you," he answered cordially. "Hello, Doctor," Osiris exclaimed from the other side of the living room. "Please sit down. Anything to drink?" "Yes, please. Long Island iced tea will be fine," he said. They sat down in the living room, chatting about this week's news, particularly the latest multiracial elections in South Africa, catapulting Nelson Mandela into the presidency of the former pariah state, and mentioning the man who shot another man in the number 4 train at Grand Central Station. "That was scary," Glenda interrupted. "I take the number 4 almost daily. Can you imagine?" Dr. Bearlight's mind, however, was elsewhere. He couldn't help but notice their television set as static was flickering across the screen, and a soft hissing sound was echoing throughout the room. "Something must have happened to the cable box," he muttered. "How odd." "Why is it odd?" Glenda inquired. "Because the screen static and the hissing sound are exactly what we need for your training. Now observe," he replied. There was no respite with Dr. Bearlight, always direct and straight to the point. There wasn't a moment to lose with unnecessary pleasantries. The doctor was staring intently at the TV screen and breathing slowly. "Here it comes," Glenda said to Osiris, anticipating the doctor's aura to appear and detach itself from his body. But alas, instead, it seemed as though the doctor's body was phasing in and out of existence. 1 minute, he was there, sitting on the sofa, and in the next, he simply disappeared. For the next 3 minutes, the doctor was phasing in and out repeatedly, until he finally transformed into a ball of TV static. The ball was floating in the middle of the living room for a few seconds. It then shrank slightly, and suddenly swooped right into the TV set. The TV screen was ablaze. The entire set was in flux, appearing and disappearing in an ever-increasing speed. Glenda began to shake, fearing the screen was about to explode. Osiris held her tightly in his arms and said, "Don't worry. He knows what he's doing." The television set finally solidified, and the ball of static pounced right out of it. It hovered the living room sofa and began to twist and turn, contorting and buckling, until it finally coalesced into a full-figured human form. Dr. Bearlight was back, sitting on the sofa, sipping his Long Island iced tea as though nothing has happened. Osiris looked at the doctor, gazing at him with his piercing emerald eyes, and asked, "Do you expect us to know what you have just done?" "Essentially, yes," he replied, "but not right away. What you have just witnessed is a battery charging process. This is how I magnify the intensity of my aura, by fusing it with power sources, such as a television set, and imbuing it with electricity-type energy on a quantum level. When I first discovered my ability in India, I'd sit at the riverbank and gaze at the sunlight reflected off the water. The sun is the ultimate power source, and fusing your thoughts with the sun's light is similar to what I have just demonstrated with the TV static. Once you reach a point of clarity of thought, while focusing on the sun's light or the television's electricity, as manifested by the crackling, hissing noises, you become one with the energy source, thus magnifying or charging your aura's potency by 1,000-fold, or possibly more. He went on, "My current level of training, I can manipulate my aura to suspend reality as you perceive it, transforming and reshaping it as you just observed." "But we're not as adept as you are," Glenda interrupted. "It will take us years of training to become proficient in such a focused meditative practice." "That is true," he replied, "but you have me." He smiled, "and I can transfer the essence of my years of practice to you, thereby saving us precious time." He then got up off the sofa and assumed the star position Glenda was acquainted with from his previous demonstration at his office. This time, however, a flash of light did not spring out from the top of his head. He simply transformed into a ball of white light, just as he did earlier when he morphed into a ball of static, that filled the entire room with a magnificent, radiant glow that shot right out of their living room terrace. Dr. Bearlight's luminescent aura enveloped Glenda and Osiris entirely. The light seeped through their skin and nostrils as they were breathing it. Their bodies appeared to be thinning in density, while maintaining their shape and form. They were both floating in the air, as Dr. Bearlight's ball of light appeared to have condensed itself around the two of them. They felt euphoric and happy, overcome by a sense of transcendence they have never experienced before. They were attempting to hold hands as they were floating, but they seemed to lack matter as their bodies passed right through each other. The look on both their faces was one of sheer joy and divine contentment, as if the secret of creation itself was somehow revealed onto them in its bare nakedness. Rapid bangs on the apartment door have unexpectedly interrupted Dr. Bearlight's energy transference process. He coalesced back into himself as Glenda and Osiris descended softly on the floor, while their bodies consolidated and solidified. The knocks on the door grew even stronger. "Yes, yes!" Osiris hollered. "Who is it?" "It's Justin. Mr. Jones, your next-door neighbor. Is everything okay in there?" "Yes, of course, Justin," he said as he opened the door. "Anything the matter?" "Well, we thought your apartment was on fire," Justin continued. "There were intense flashes of light coming out of your balcony. We thought the whole place was going up in flames." "Do you mean flashes like that?" Dr. Bearlight interjected, and pointed at what appeared to be a gigantic crystal ball situated on the coffee table. The ball was flashing intensely, illuminating the entire room with a yellowish-reddish glow. "It's my new invention. It's battery-operated. I don't believe we've met. I am Dr. Bearlight,